I'm thrilled to be here this morning. I've been, as my little bio says, very, very engaged with the project of bringing relational psychoanalysis and self-psychology and philosophy of the implicit and focusing together. Both of these are concerned with the process of emergence in therapy and how that's integrally involved with the therapeutic interaction and the relationship that the patient has with the therapist and with themselves are one kind of unity. It seems like there are many assumptions and concerns that these two traditions hold together, but they have come from different intellectual heritages and sometimes not quite on speaking terms, these two, the humanistic and the psychoanalytic. And so the cultures are really different. And we're hoping that the experience this morning will be an intercultural venture and dialogue. Sometimes in the program that I do, my psychoanalytic students are sometimes put off by the focusing language, and the focusing students are sometimes unhappy with the psychoanalytic lexicon and culture. And so today I'm going to try to make these experience near and experience friendly, and want you to get involved with the dialogue. All of the things that we're doing today are about you and about helping you to think and helping you to to get involved with this conversation that I think is a very, very important conversation. These traditions have lived in me very much intertwined since my beginnings as a psychotherapist. I had studied many forms of therapy in my early years and still felt sort of ungrounded, like I didn't know how to put them together. And in the midst of a big move in my apartment filled with boxes, I came across this flyer about Eugene Genlin, who I didn't know of, doing a workshop on experiential listening. And somehow I just had this feeling, this felt sense, that I should go to this, left my whole living room filled with boxes, and went to this workshop. And it was a feeling of coming home. It was a feeling of love at first sight. Something about the breadth of this approach coming from a philosophy and a new way of thinking, and also being involved with the very, very small detail of movement. In this workshop, which was over 30 years ago, I still remember, we were learning how to listen not to the content, but to what wanted to be said, what the person was holding inside that hadn't quite come into words and thoughts yet. And so, of course, that's the essence of what focusing-oriented therapy is concerned with. So I studied with Genlin and started a training program with him and did some therapy with him. And then he left New York, and I was still hungry for something. I felt like this was a wonderful grounding, but I didn't know something that I really wanted to know about working in the relationship in therapy. What is this therapy relationship that is so sort of magical in a way, that in an hour sometimes, 45 minutes, once or twice a week, that this relationship can become so intimate and deep and life-changing. And I had trouble studying psychoanalysis because of the way it was taught at that time until Kohut came along in self-psychology, and that gave me an entree into a whole world of psychoanalytic thinking. I loved Kohut's way of talking about the relational needs that we all have, and how therapy is a way of addressing those deep needs, and that these are needs not that you have in childhood and then you grow out of and then you become an independent, mature adult, but these are needs that you have from life to death, and relational self-psychology gives me a way of looking at the detail of the relationship in therapy and navigating that relationship. So from the philosophy of the implicit and the focusing, I get something philosophic, something new and broad in thinking, and also the very small micro movements of how to facilitate emergence in therapy. From psychoanalysis, I get something about the journey over time, the relationship as it unfolds, and in that I get rich theory. The theory is sort of in the middle, there's philosophy, practice, and theory in the middle, and I get a lot of wonderful input from all different branches of the large tent of relational self-psychology, and in that, of course, I'm including the neighbors of it: infant research, intersubjective systems, how we take from complexity theory, trauma theory, all of that. So, in my attempt to have a cross-cultural venture, I decided to lay down some ground rules. The psychoanalysts are not to interpret this morning, and the focusing people are not allowed to hug. Or tell anybody to go inside or anything like that. We're not allowed to go inside. No, you can go inside, but we're not going to say that in those words, at least. But if you're a psychoanalyst and you're a focusing person, I guess then maybe you can hug and interpret. I'm not sure about that, because we have lots of permutations here. I'm going to share with you a little clinical exchange as soon as you get your papers. And let's notice the function of theory as we go through this little narrative. Theory is a lens, a map, an orientation. I've even given a talk about theory as a good mother, the mother that can guide us and help us in our moments of crisis in the clinical exchange, rather than the way we hold theory as a sort of patriarchal figure that tells us we're doing it wrong. Right? But if you notice how you're paying attention, what you're seeing, theory highlights something, some aspect of experience, and brings it alive. And your orientation will determine what you notice. So I'm going to ask you afterwards what you noticed. Well, you're going to notice as I'm reading, right? You have to do two. Ellen always says she can't do two things at the same time. My buzzer rang and I came to the door expecting my patient Pat. Much to my surprise, a stranger stood at the door, handing me an envelope and said, I'm Dee. My friend Pat gave me her session. There's a note and a check in the envelope. Taken aback, I sputtered, well, she didn't mention anything to me about this. Oh, it happened quite spontaneously, Dee explained. Is it okay? I paused for a moment thinking, what does this mean? How do I understand this? We analysts are always asking, what does it mean? How do I understand this? But since I had been cultivating spontaneity and improvisation, I thought, oh, what the hell, let's see what happens. I invited the stranger in. She smiled appreciatively and began immediately to tell me how she had a meltdown over the weekend and was quite uncharacteristically at her wit's end. She said that she has always been has done very well in her career. She's always had wonderful jobs until the recession hit and she was laid off. She's been looking vigorously, sending out hundreds of resumes but getting no response. She said that she has always been a push-through person. But now she's come to the end of the line where there's nowhere to push through. Although she has always been the person that others rely on for her resourcefulness and stability, she now feels invisible, resourceless, and helpless. She had poured out her heart to her friend Pat and said that she feels like nobody knows how much trouble she feels she's in, and Pat had given her the session. I was immediately engaged and impressed with the way she was speaking, right from the feeling level. The nuances that she was articulating of the quality of her experience. How is it to be a push-through person with no place to push through? I said. It's demoralizing, confusing, disorienting. It's like the world has turned upside down and everything is different. It's a different world. I've always been able to go after what I want and now I can't. Me. The world is different, not responding to you in the same way, and you feel different? D. Nobody's reaching out to me, maybe because everyone feels that I'm the one that has it all together, the one who is blessed. Oh, I said, yes, I see. Maybe they can't conceive of the one who has it all together, needing help from them. What am I supposed to do? I've always been the responsible one. How can I be responsible? How can I push through when there's no response? I was sort of taken by surprise here. And it felt like it needed something. So I said, what a question. Maybe we can pause here and see what might come right from that question. Let's listen and see if something shows up. She was taken by surprise, but she settled back in her chair and was quiet. There was a long pause. She looked down as if to read something from inside. And then in a more reflective tone, she said, I think I'm supposed to ask. I wasn't expecting this answer. Yes. Ask. I said, ask. Yes. She looks down again as if to find what she wants to say. I never had to ask for anything. Even as a child, I didn't ask my parents. They saw me as the strong one in the family, and somehow I think that I need to learn how to ask. Ask for help, to be a new way. It's hard for me, Dee says. What's hard about it? I feel as if it's weak to ask, ungrateful. It's not appreciating all I have, all I've been given. Me. asking doesn't fit with who you feel you are in the world. It doesn't seem right for you, even though it's right for other people. D. Yes, that's right. I'm not the one who asks. And then there's a pause, and you know how it is that are kind of stuck, and the patient needs something, and there are pauses that are pregnant pauses, and we need to leave those and see the next thing that comes. But this seemed like a stuck pause. So I said, what did it feel like to turn to Pat? Was that a kind of asking? D. Looks up surprised. I guess I was asking then. I cried, I told her everything. I was even angry at her for not noticing how distraught I've been. How did it actually feel to ask? With a smile. It actually felt strong and direct. It felt like it took courage, and that I had the courage. It felt good. It didn't feel weak. It didn't feel ungrateful. It felt straightforward. Straightforward, strong, courageous. What a recognition that is. The actual experience was so different from what you thought. It really was different. And both of us just sort of took this in for a while. And I said, and is this coming to me, a stranger, a kind of asking? Are you implicitly asking me for something? Dee laughs, sits back. Yes, that took a lot of courage. That was really a risk. I've never done anything as difficult as that. How is it? It feels very good. You know, I am the kind of person who can say what's really going on. I am someone who can take risks. Me. You were a push-through person about asking, weren't you? She grins. Yes, I am that person, even though I've never done it before. This is truly who I am. I just love the little turn there at the end, that she's never done it before, but this is who she truly is. I chose this vignette because it has both elements of self-psychology and elements of focusing, and I thought we could tease that out together. What did you notice? We're not going to have a lot of time to talk about that, but just call out. Just anything you noticed.
I noticed that your voice changed at one point, and it was the focusing voice.
My voice changed at one point, and that was my focusing voice. Very interesting. There is a focusing voice, yes. And is there a psychoanalytic voice? I guess so, yes. What else?
I always found it, thinking of this last session, I thought it was amazing how she was open with her feelings and to talk about her being touched so quickly.
Yes. And she kindly gave me permission to talk about this with you. Yes, that's something that I, of course, noticed also, that she was very open, and her feelings, that level of experience was accessible for her from the start. You know, it's really cheating to use this vignette, because what we usually are struggling with is very far from the person who comes through the door and is right ready to explore in this way. But I'm allowed to cheat because I'm here. Anything else you notice? Yes?
It seems significant, very significant, that with all the filters we could use, somebody, in effect, a stranger comes in and you could respond in so many ways, and you, in effect, see how you are so impressed that you engage. You let yourself be engaged.
Mm.
So it's such a wide spectrum of responses.
That one could have, yes, like, oh my God, who is this person? I think that that's typical of both self-psychology and of focusing, that the importance of the receptivity of the therapist. I like Donald Stern's phrase, courting surprise, that in both of these traditions, we learn how to court surprise. Yeah.
I love that she comes up by herself with the idea that I should ask. Although that's such an implicit idea behind self-psychology. You don't have to put that out there. She knows that.
Yes, Michelle notices that she found this herself. This wasn't in any way led by me, although it would be something that we would think about in self-psychology. Yeah, Susan.
It came, though, out of your pausing. And you're saying, let's slow down, see what is here, and making this is a focus.
That was a focusing moment. Yes, that this came out of this focusing moment of slowing down and pausing and seeing what would come right from the implicit in her.
And that's where your voice changed.
And that's where my voice changed. Yes, yes.
And that's an interesting moment because she's suddenly shrill and demanding when she says, I don't know how to ask, I don't, what does she say?
How am I going to be responsible?
How am I going to be responsible? How can I push through and I get no response? And that's one of those moments when we can get anxious.
Mm.
Because she's pulling for a response. So that's a one, in some ways that's and maybe this happens in self-psychology too, but I know it more from the focusing, is that moment of anxiety. If you can catch yourself feeling anxious, you can think, oh, this is a good moment to go inside.
Uh-huh.
It gets you off the hook. It keeps you from giving a response that's called for, which would be more cognitive.
So Jude is saying that that it gets me off the hook, and instead of answering the question literally, and this was sort of a rhetorical question really, but I could have gotten caught up in, well, let's see how you can be responsible. You've sent out all these resumes, and maybe who have you sent them to, or something like that. So it saves me from that kind of intervention that I might feel pressured to go to that level.
I'm missing something. What saves you?
What saves me from going to that? Jude is saying that by turning the rhetorical question into a real question that she could ask inside. I promised not to say ask inside. No, I said go inside. I could say ask inside. That saves me from having to respond to the question in its literal form. Yeah.
I think it also, I think that's the turning point of the whole session. I think that it gives her somewhere to go, indeed, when she's stuck. It's like, I didn't know there could be some sort of positive way to do anything here. And in that case,
yes, that she's sort of in a dilemma here. She's sort of stuck here. And when she finds this
a way to go.
this developmental possibility, there's an opening.
Yeah. Okay.
This is where the self-psychology and the focusing meet, because you are empathic to that meeting. You get it, and you resonate, and you reflect that back by saying, oh, wow, I hear you. You have this question. And then you kind of, so once you have that with her, then you send it back to her and say, oh, let's see where you are with this and what
Yes, yes. So Susan, who's both a psychoanalyst and a focusing person, says this is where these traditions come together. The empathic attunement and the sensitivity to this implicit process that one can actually use as a resource, that one can tap into. Yeah, you don't have, just call out.
Yeah, what I found very poignant was her saying that she never had to ask for anything. And implicit in that is that her dependency needs, her neediness, was never acknowledged. It was always hidden.
Yes, yes. Now this is very much, I think, the way that we think as self-psychologists. We think about what is the backstory here? What has this person experienced as a child that would bring them to this particular place? And so we might say, oh, there was no room for her in her family to be needy or to be in touch with her needs or to ask. Yes. And of course, I bet, how many of you self-psychologists were thinking that? And we have quite a few hands. Yes.
But also she was ready to experience asking in a very positive way. That seems like something that might not happen so quickly. In other words, she felt empowered. She felt strong. She didn't feel, the trailing edge of asking and being needy. She felt positive in response to it. That struck me as unusual.
Yes. How did we co-create that together? The positive, Ellen.
Well, I think that most of what you did was tracking, which is empathic interpretation, forward edge interpretation. It was interpretive in a self-psychological way, and that sets the stage. I mean, that creates a receptivity, a trust that makes that moment when your voice changes and you send her into this focusy place. It makes it.
They caught that. Yes.
Into the focusing cave.
Into the focusing cave. But I think that that's true. But I think that it was not as much the tracking before that moment that made the asking feel empowering, but what happened after when she got in touch with the asking. Yeah, Jeffrey.
One thing that struck me very strongly was that the patient, who probably either might know or might not know about these terms and these philosophies, theories, any of that, would not know that this was a blending of this and that or anything like that.
No.
It would appear to be just a very seamless experience, and I think that speaks to the value of these two going together, because it really is a whole. Her experience would have been just a very solid sort of coming from one place, not blending or trying to stretch for anything.
Absolutely. Jeffrey is involved with me in a project of starting an exploration of integrative approaches and how we integrate things. And most of us, if not all of us, integrate more than one approach. And they're integrated inside us. We are an integration. That's our nature. And so, yes, they're living together there. I wanted to go back, though, to this idea of the forward edge interpretation. The place where I noticed that the most was when she stuck. For me, it seemed like there were two moments. There was the focusing moment, if we could call it that, and then there was the moment where she's stuck. And I pick up the inactive quality of this. In self-psychology, we're and in focusing actually, but often more explicitly talked about in self-psychology, we're always thinking about what is being enacted as well as what's being talked about. In focusing, actually, we would talk about that as the doing in the saying, that we're always doing something together. We are an interaction that is doing something. And what is that? It might be something very different than what we're talking about. Jean Genlin actually uses this example that I love of the client saying, nobody understands me, nobody listens to me. And if the therapist says, but don't I understand you? Aren't I listening to you? Then it's the doing is the same thing that the client talks about. It's confirming that. If the therapist can say, oh, even here you don't feel understood, you don't feel listened to, then the doing is something different from the expectation of the client. But in this instance, there was a doing that was implicitly her asking, and she's saying that that she's not a person who asks. And in my bringing that to her attention, that's a kind of forward edge interpretation, I think. I'm saying, well, how is that? And then, of course, I'm offering it to her to see. She might answer anything. She might say it's terrible. But bringing that to her attention in a way that values it, I think enabled her to feel that she and I can do this new way together, and that it could be empowering. Any other comments?
I was wondering about the shame she may have felt in asking, because she never had to ask.
Yes. It's very interesting because in her life she felt the shame, but she didn't feel that in the session. It felt like a whole new part of her. I guess it was really so outside the ordinary for both of us. Here we're these two strangers having an encounter. It's like going to the bar and getting drunk and talking to the, well, not exactly like that. Yes.
I think with your interpretation that she was a push-through person,
Mm-hmm.
in asking, you actually made a cognitive intervention. You were clearing up some cognitive dissonance for her. So it wasn't, I mean, she had already set the stage for that by saying she felt strong in doing it.
Yes.
But you confirmed that and made it less me and not me.
Yes.
This was her, and so it was okay, and she was still the same type of person.
Yes.
And she could ask.
Yes. That's very interesting there. Something about the shame, sure.
Because I think you did acknowledge it earlier in some way. Because earlier where it says, she says, I feel as if it's weak to ask, I'm grateful. But she gets into it there a bit. It's not appreciating all I have, all I think to. Asking doesn't fit in with who you feel you are in the world. There is a way in which you are resonating with her.
Yes.
With her feeling of being shameful or bad. And I think that helps her be more open to it.
Absolutely. So both self-psychologically and in a focusing way, the resonating, and the validating of the experience is throughout here. I just want to say one other thing, and then we're going to move on, about the name. The naming of her experience, the push-through person, was a very important part of the process. And in focusing, we learned that a word or a phrase can be a handle for a whole implicit living that's more complex than could be put into words. And this handle, this phrase, a push-through person, is the whole session hinges on that, really, and her being able to find that name. So I'm going to, there's so much more we could say here, but there will be time for questions. I want to now introduce you. This was so hard for me, preparing for this talk, because I'm introducing the focusing people to self-psychology, and there's, a gigantic world there, and introducing the self-psychologists to focusing, and then if I included the philosophy of the implicit, you'd have to spend about 5 years at least, maybe 5 years on, at least 5 years on each one, and I have about 10 minutes. But I'm going to read a few lines from T.S. Eliot that will introduce this experiential world of focusing. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard in the stillness, between two waves of the sea. Does that give you a flavor for this territory of the space between conscious and unconscious, the meeting place of conscious and unconscious, explicit and implicit? This joining, this edge of awareness that Genlin talks about, it comes to us in a visceral way, not in a thinking way. We actually live from our implicit understanding, our implicit grasp of things. We don't even know the next words that we're going to say, and if you're giving a talk, that can be pretty frightening, right? The words have to come, and we can't control that. We can prepare, but who knows whether they'll come or they won't come. And that's a body coming. It's an organismic living. They come in the way tears come or laughter comes. The words come from this larger understanding. And a simple way of thinking about what focusing is that it's sensing into this. We appreciate you as participants, that the comments have been wonderful and the dialogue is very rich. Are you sure there isn't any last comment that anyone wants to say before we move on?
Lynn?
Yes,
I don't
come.
really want to come up there either. See, I'll come up here and I'll have forgotten what I wanted to say.
Then you'll have to focus on it.
Well, I just want to say I really thank you all. It was wonderful. Each one of you was more wonderful as you went on. But I think that focusing has been so important to me in a way that it has allowed me in myself and in my work to really get in touch with the more. And I think that a lot of us get stuck in anxiety and a sense of where to go with the patient. And there's something of allowing something more to come that is very powerful. And really has just shifted how I work. So now I'm going to stop for a moment because I'm very anxious being up here. So I was going to say, when I worked at this hospital, and after 9/11, we got this grant to provide training for the staff, and I invited Lynn to come. And we were sitting around waiting for people to show up, and I think there were 4 of us. And Lynn said, well, let's just focus for a moment. And these people had not focused. And she said, well, there was a piece of chalk on the table. And she said, how do you feel about that piece of chalk? Just kind of go inside your body right now and just see what comes there about this piece of chalk. I go, oh my God, a piece of chalk. And so I look at this piece of chalk on the table, and I kind of close my eyes, and I think, well, it's a piece of chalk on the table. So then, we all open up our eyes, and Lynn asks us to share, and this one guy says, well, I was thinking about this piece of chalk and how it really shouldn't be there, and it should be back on the blackboard that is, not too far away. And it's really annoying me, actually, that the piece of chalk is here. And I immediately realized I didn't want him to take this piece of chalk and put it back on the board. I wanted the piece of chalk just where it was. And I think what came out of that was this whole interaction then with him, kind of about, attachment, and what it means to lose something as simple as a piece of chalk. And something just of how much is inside of us that we don't realize at any one particular moment, that's around us, that we're reacting to, that we're interacting with, and that has so much information in it about who we are all the time. So it's influenced me tremendously, and I thank Lynn very much for putting this all together, and it's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.